All right, you royal rubberneckers. Let's cut the crap about Cinderella and Prince Charming
Yeah.
and dive into some real-life royal bullshit.
Okay.
Today, we're talking about Queen Mary of Teck, a woman whose life was more fucked up than a Jerry Springer finale.
She was indeed a fascinating character.
Oh, yeah.
Her story offers a glimpse into a time of immense change and honestly some serious royal drama.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Uh,
May, as her family called her, wasn't your average princess.
right.
Born in Kensington Palace, she was living the dream, right?
Sure.
But her family, the Tecks, were bloody broke. What's the deal with that?
Well, her father was a German nobleman with no inheritance. And to make matters worse, their marriage was morganatic.
Morgan, what now?
A morganatic marriage.
Okay.
It basically means he was lower on the royal totem pole, so he couldn't pass on his titles or privileges to May. They got a little cash from Parliament, and May's mom had some family money, but they were hemorrhaging funds.
Really?
Mostly because May's mom was a charitable asshat, giving away money they didn't have.
Oh, wow.
They ended up bouncing around Europe, trying to keep up appearances on a shoestring budget.
So imagine little May being dragged across Europe while her parents tried to act like they weren't completely broke. But, hey, at least she became trilingual, which is more than I can say for some of the current royals.
Right.
Anyway, Queen Victoria, the original royal puppet master, had her eye on May for her grandson, Prince Albert Victor. Classic arranged marriage bullshit, right?
Exactly. Queen Victoria was quite fond of May,
Yeah.
seeing her as a suitable future queen. Strategic marriages were the name of the game back then,
Yeah.
all about power and alliances.
So they got engaged. But then Albert Victor kicked the bucket from the flu like 6 weeks later. Talk about bad luck.
It was very sad.
But hold on, because here's where things get really interesting. Enter Prince George, Albert Victor's brother, next in line to the throne, and conveniently already close to May.
Well, everyone was freaking out about the line of succession.
Oh, really?
Prince George needed to get married and produce an heir ASAP. And Queen Victoria clearly thought May was up to the job,
Yeah.
even though her first fiancé died on her.
Damn, that's cold. Talk about being used. So they tied the knot in 1893, moved into their cramped-ass cottage, and popped out 6 kids, one after another. But get this, their nanny was a goddamn psychopath, abusing Edward and Albert, the 2 eldest.
Yeah.
And Mary and George were oblivious.
But detached parenting was pretty typical back then, especially among the upper class. They relied heavily on nannies, which, as you can see, sometimes had disastrous consequences.
Yeah.
It really highlights the fucked up class dynamics of the time.
Yeah, it's a pretty messed up situation. Thankfully, they got rid of the psycho nanny and found a competent one. But seriously, how do you miss your kids being abused? Anyway, after Queen Victoria finally croaked, George's dad became King Edward VII.
Yes.
And guess what? Our royal power couple went on an insane 8-month tour of the British Empire.
It was a huge PR stunt designed to show off the power and reach of the British Empire. They went everywhere. Gibraltar, Malta, Egypt, Ceylon, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, you name it.
They basically circled the globe, shaking hands and kissing babies.
Right.
But all that globetrotting couldn't shield them from the shitstorm that was brewing back home.
That's right. While they were gallivanting around the world, their youngest son, John, was struggling with epilepsy and developmental issues.
Poor little dude.
Yeah.
They kept his condition pretty hush-hush,
Yeah.
but he sadly died at 13.
Mm.
Talk about a punch in the gut.
It was a devastating loss for the royal family. And it really puts their lavish lifestyle into perspective. Even with all their wealth and privilege, they couldn't escape the realities of life and death.
So here they are, dealing with the death of their son, and bam, King Edward VII kicks the bucket in 1910.
Right.
George takes the throne, making Mary the queen consort. But this wasn't some fairy tale coronation. There was some serious bad blood brewing behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely. Mary had to deal with Queen Alexandra, her mother-in-law, who was basically a royal pain in the ass.
Oh, kidding.
She didn't want to give up her fancy jewels or her top spot at the funeral procession.
Talk about a power struggle. Can you imagine those two passive-aggressively sniping at each other over tea and crumpets?
Well, you have to remember, those jewels represented power and prestige.
Right.
And Alexandra was not about to let go of them without a fight. It's a classic example of the cutthroat nature of royal life, even within families.
Yeah, like Game of Thrones, but with tiaras and corgis. Anyway, just as things are settling down, World War I explodes. Talk about a shit show.
Mm.
Mary basically goes into full-on wartime mode.
Yeah.
Rationing food at the palace and visiting wounded soldiers.
Yeah.
She was like the original keep calm and carry on poster girl.
Her wartime efforts were incredibly important for morale. She was projecting an image of strength and solidarity with the people, which helped to maintain public support for the monarchy during a very turbulent time.
Yeah, while everyone else was losing their shit, she was all stoic and badass.
Mm.
But even Mary couldn't escape the tragedies of war.
Right.
Remember her cousin, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia?
Of course.
Well, he and his entire family got murdered by the Bolsheviks.
It was a horrific event and had huge repercussions for the British monarchy. There was a lot of pressure for them to grant asylum to the Romanovs. But with anti-German sentiment running high, they decided it was too risky.
Can you imagine the PR nightmare? It would look like they were siding with their German relatives over their own people.
Exactly. It was a political tightrope walk, and ultimately they chose the path of self-preservation.
Smart move. But the war wasn't their only problem. The abdication of the German Kaiser was fueling Republican sentiments in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
People were starting to question the relevance of the monarchy in a modern world.
The monarchy had to adapt and prove its worth to the people. Mary, with her dedication to duty and her wartime efforts, played a key role in maintaining public support during those tumultuous times. She understood that the monarchy had to evolve if it wanted to survive.
She was a savvy operator, that's for sure. But even Mary had her breaking point. Remember John, her son who died young?
Right.
But 2 months after the war ended, she lost another son, George, Duke of Kent, in a plane crash.
Yeah.
Can you imagine burying 2 of your children?
It's an unimaginable loss, and it speaks volumes about Mary's strength and resilience that she was able to carry on.
She was a tough old bird, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But all this death and destruction couldn't distract from the brewing shitstorm that was Edward VIII. He was head over heels for Wallis Simpson,
Yeah.
an American socialite who was already twice divorced. Talk about a royal scandal.
It was a huge deal at the time. Divorce was incredibly taboo, especially for the monarch, who was the head of the Church of England.
Right.
Marrying a divorced woman, let alone one who was divorced twice, was simply unthinkable.
Mary was having none of it. She refused to even meet Wallis. Can you blame her? Her son was about to throw away the crown for some American floozy.
Mary was a traditionalist, and she believed in the sanctity of marriage and the monarchy. She saw Edward's actions as a betrayal of his duty and a slap in the face to the entire country.
It was a constitutional crisis.
Oh.
The whole country was freaking out, and Edward was stubborn as a mule. In the end, he chose love over duty and abdicated the throne. What a selfish prick.
The abdication sent shockwaves around the world.
For sure.
It was a pivotal moment in British history, forcing people to reevaluate the role of the monarchy in modern society.
And through it all, Mary stood by her other son, Albert, who became King George VI after Edward's abdication.
Right.
She even attended his coronation, the first Queen Mother to do so.
Her presence provided stability and continuity during a very uncertain time. It showed the public that the monarchy was still strong even after such a dramatic upheaval.
She was like the royal glue, holding everything together. And even though she disapproved of Edward's abdication, she still loved him. But she never let him forget what a monumental fuck-up he'd made.
She was a complex woman navigating a very complex world. But one thing is for sure, she was fiercely loyal to her family and to the British monarchy.
And while all this was going on, she was busy raising her granddaughters, Elizabeth and Margaret. Talk about a hands-on grandmother. She was basically shaping the future Queen of England.
Her influence on Elizabeth was significant. She instilled in her a sense of duty, decorum, and the importance of tradition.
But Mary wasn't just about etiquette and stuffy traditions. When World War II broke out, George VI wanted to evacuate her to safety, but she told him to shove it.
She refused to leave London during the Blitz, even when the city was being bombed to hell. She stayed put and visited troops and factories, boosting morale and showing solidarity with the people.
She was a total badass. She even started picking up hitchhiking soldiers in her car. Can you imagine that? The Queen Mother cruising around London, picking up soldiers like a goddamn Uber driver.
It's an incredible story, and it shows just how down-to-earth she could be.
Yeah, she was full of surprises. But even Mary couldn't escape the horrors of war. In 1942, her son George, Duke of Kent, was killed in a plane crash while on active duty. Can you believe she lost 3 of her children?
It's a testament to her strength and resilience that she was able to carry on.
She was a force of nature. After the war, she returned to Marlborough House and went back to her favorite pastime, collecting shit.
Queen Mary was an avid collector of art and objects with royal provenance. She had a keen eye for detail and a deep appreciation for history.
But let's be real, she was basically a royal kleptomaniac.
Aka.
She was notorious for dropping hints until people just gave her stuff. Oh, that Fabergé egg is simply divine. It would look lovely in my collection. And bam. The next day, it's on her mantelpiece.
Her methods might have been unconventional, but she significantly enriched the royal collection.
Let's be honest, she was a master manipulator. But hey, she was the queen mother, so she could pretty much get away with anything.
She certainly wielded her influence effectively.
Fast forward to 1952. George VI dies, and Elizabeth becomes queen. Mary had outlived 3 of her 6 children. Can you imagine the pain?
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of royal life. Even with all their power and privilege, they were still susceptible to the same tragedies as everyone else.
But Mary was a tough old broad. She insisted that Elizabeth's coronation shouldn't be postponed if she died before the big day. And guess what? She died 10 weeks before the coronation. Talk about going out with a bang.
Her death marked the end of an era. She had witnessed extraordinary historical events and had played a pivotal role in shaping the British monarchy as we know it today.
So Queen Mary, the ultimate royal badass, leaves behind a complicated legacy. She was a product of her time for sure, but she also helped to modernize the monarchy and navigate some pretty tumultuous times. What do you think she'd make of the royal family today? Can you imagine her reaction to Harry and Meghan spilling the tea on Oprah?
I think she'd probably have a royal stroke. She was all about duty and discretion. Can you imagine her reaction to those Instagram selfies and tell-all interviews?
She'd probably be launching teacups at the telly, shouting, "This is why we can't have nice things."
But I also think she'd admire Queen Elizabeth II's resilience and her ability to adapt to a changing world. Mary had to navigate some pretty choppy waters herself, and I think she'd respect Elizabeth's ability to weather the storms.
Yeah, they were both tough old birds. But I bet Mary would have some choice words for Charles and his, shall we say, eccentric habit.
She might raise an eyebrow at his penchant for talking to plants, but she'd also appreciate his commitment to environmental causes. Remember, she was a pragmatist at heart.
True, she was all about practicality. But I think she'd secretly enjoy the drama. Let's be honest, the royal family is like a never-ending soap opera. And Mary, despite her stoic facade, loved a good gossip session.
I think you're right. She might publicly disapprove of all the scandals and tabloid fodder, but behind closed doors, she'd be eating it up with a silver spoon.
So what's the takeaway here? What can we learn from Queen Mary's tumultuous life?
I think her story reminds us that even those in the most privileged positions are still human. They experience love and lost joy and sorrow just like everyone else. But it also shows us the power of resilience and adaptation. The monarchy has survived for centuries because it's been able to evolve with the times, and Mary played a key role in ensuring its continued relevance.
Well said. She was a complex and contradictory figure, but there's no denying she left her mark on history.
Absolutely. And her story continues to fascinate us today, proving that truth is often stranger and far more entertaining than fiction.
That's it for our deep dive into the life and times of Queen Mary of Teck. She was a princess born broke a queen who rationed food, a mother who buried 3 of her children, and a royal kleptomaniac with impeccable taste.
She was a woman of contradictions, but her story reminds us that history is never black and white. It's messy, complicated, and full of surprises, just like Queen Mary herself.
If you want to delve deeper into the world of royal shenanigans and historical intrigue, check out the sources we used for this deep dive. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, history is never as simple as it seems.